Hey everyone, Brendan Snyder here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to the special review for the Black Sabbath Anno Domini box set, 1989-1995. This is a 4 CD box set that covers the Tony Martin years, just released on Friday, May 31st of 2024. I'm going to do a full review and unboxing here of it just a bit. But before we get into it, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like. All those things help support my channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, if you turn on notifications, you'll never miss a video just like this where we're doing a review for the brand new Black Sabbath box set, Anno Domini 1989-1995 box set for the Tony Martin years. So very cool to finally be getting this. This is one of those things that had been long gestating. We had heard for a number of years. It was supposed to have come out a few years back, and each year, Tony Iommi, the guitar player, only guy that's been part of the lineup through the whole thing, would say, next year, I promise, sort of a thing. And here we are finally getting it, halfway through the year even. We really should have gotten this last year. We should have gotten it at the beginning of this year. But anyway, finally it's here. Now, does it live up to all of the hype and everything that we had all hoped for? Because there was a lot of talk about it containing a ton of unreleased material, which did not happen to it. So I'm going to break all that down as we get into it. I just want to start with a little bit of history here because the Black Sabbath history is so convoluted over the years. The band formed way back in 1968, so they're over 50 years old at this point. But they're really more famous for their two previous eras of the band, the first being with Ozzy Osbourne, which spanned 68 to 1979, so an 11-year period. And then maybe era number two being the second period with Ronnie James Dio coming in 1979 and only lasting 3 years to 1982, but he made a huge impact, coming over from Rainbow and joining in. It was very different, but it worked somehow. And so then I say sort of the band hit a third era, and it isn't necessarily for any one member. It was just that the band would go through so many members, changing left and right. And unfortunately, it's what the band became known for was the constant change in members. Ian Gillan of Deep Purple came in and sang on the Born Again album in 1983. So, what sounded like could have been a really cool thing there post Ronnie James Dio only last one album. The band takes a bit of a hiatus but returns with Glenn Hughes in 1986 for the Seventh Star, which was supposed to be a solo album, but the record label talked Iommi into releasing it as a Black Sabbath album. Then Glenn Hughes not being able to tour due to substance abuse and things of that nature. At the time, they brought in an unknown guy, Ray Gillan, who would go on to front Badlands. So in the years since, has the notoriety that Ray Gillan, no relation to Ian Gillan, had fronted the band for the Seventh Star tour and recorded the vocals for an early version of The Eternal Idol. Now, he didn't last long, and he left before the completion of this album or the release of the album, really, because they have since released the original album recorded with him. But this here is the Tony Martin version of the album and released in 1987. And with the addition of Tony Martin, the band would basically stabilize a bit, at least in the vocalist role. A lot of the other members, bass, drums, other positions, came and went with the band changing. But during Tony Martin's time with the band, which spans from 87 to 1995, there was a break and a change in the lineup in there. And, they brought in Ronnie James Dio to do the 1992 album, Dehumanizer. So you know, they reform a lineup that was from the past when he was there. That was very cool. But then even that didn't last because they went and did an aborted attempt of a reunion with Ozzy Osbourne when they did his farewell tour. And Ronnie James Dio wasn't having any of that. And they brought in Rob Halford to front the band when they opened up for Ozzy for that, which is very short-lived. Would have been cool if they had continued with him to see what that would have been like. But all in all, Tony Martin recorded with the band 5 studio albums. So we have this one, The Eternal Idol from '87, but he didn't write on this, and it really was a Ray Gillen album that he just came in and sang lead vocals on. Next we had Headless Cross 1989, which helped to start to, re-solidify and cement the band. They then made Tear in 1990. So skipping over Dehumanizer, which was 1992, we do get Tony Martin returning in 1994 for Cross Purposes. They even do a live album in there, Cross Purposes Live. And then we get the final studio album, which was for a very long time the last album before the reunited version with Ozzy made 13. But this one here, 1995, Forbidden. And unfortunately, it was not really up to par and not a great album for the band to end on due to its mix and the way that it was recorded. So that brings us to this box set. And this box set, as I said, is a 4 CD box set of the Tony Martin years. So we're not getting Eternal Idol as part of this. It starts with Headless Cross, Tear, skips over Dehumanizer, goes to Cross Purposes, and Forbidden. Now, with the name of this that we can see written on the side in the years, 89 to 95, it's also on the front cover here. It makes it sound as though Dehumanizer would be part of this, but it is not. And everyone knows this is the Tony Martin years, but I find it really odd that nowhere on this box does it say this is the Tony Martin years box, which is why Dehumanizer would be left out of it when you've got the years spanning 89 to 95, skipping over the 1992 album. But if it is the Tony Martin years, why is the Eternal Idol not part of the box set? And I have to think that has something to do with rights to the album because it was on a different record label. It was not part of IRS Records that released these 4 albums that Tony Martin was part of here. And so probably has something to do with that on it. But also, as I said, with the Eternal Idol, got to dig it back up here. With this album here, this was not really a Tony Martin album. He came in, he sang for it, but he was not part of the band. He was not part of the writing for the album. So maybe it's also sort of like he was just a hired gun at that point. And the 4 albums that they include in here are really the Tony Martin years. I could kind of get behind that. But I wish the band would make that clear, would make that as a statement, would justify it, instead of sort of leaving these oddities up in the air with covering a time period that omits 2 different albums for whatever the reasons might be as part of it. Now, I pointed out that they also recorded a live album, Cross Purposes Live, 1995, which also featured a DVD. I think mine came with the VHS at the time, but there is a DVD version of this, and they could have included that in this box, but they chose not to. And maybe that's due to other box sets like these where we have the studio albums only as part of them. They've done it for Ozzy, they've done it for Dio. So maybe this is just intended to be the studio albums. But again, there's no subheading under here that says the Tony Martin years studio albums or something of that nature. I kind of actually think I would have just liked one that picked up with the Born Again album running all the way through 95, including the Dehumanizer album. And it just had been this odd period of member changing and so forth, the period that often gets overlooked by the band. But that's not really what we're getting here. Let's get back on topic to the idea of this being the Tony Martin years box set. And so the albums that you get in here, the 3 albums, there's remastered albums. So Cross Purposes, well, starting with Headless Cross, then Tear, then Cross Purposes, all remastered. And boy, do they sound great. I I've loved all these albums. First of all, I am a Tony Martin fan, so I am head over heels with this in terms of getting a collection of these. Even though you can see I have had all the albums in various formats, whether we're talking about these previous remasters, and this is one of the early ones that is the Eternal Idol that had come out. It's actually been remastered and released 2 different times prior, so maybe that's why it doesn't need to be included as well. But albums like The Headless Cross, which has never been remastered, Tear, and Cross Purposes and Forbidden, these had never been remastered in any way, shape, or form, being that they were from the IRS label. So getting remastered versions here really elevates them. And for me, I thought the other 3 always sounded good the way they were, but Headless Cross has great songs on it, but I never thought the CD sound of it, meaning the mastering for this, was very subpar, and I never liked it. And I thought, man, if any one of the Black Sabbath albums really needs a remaster, it was this one. So we get that in here. We get the remaster of that album along with the other ones. But the thing that is really selling this is the 2024 remix of the album Forbidden. So this album here was seen as trying to modernize Black Sabbath. They brought in Ernie C. or Ernie Cunningham, who is the guitarist for Body Count, who had also produced those albums, Body Count being the band that has rapper Ice-T in it. It is his metal band. And, you know, they were kind of the it thing at the moment, and the label says, let's bring in some outside people to help, you know, boost you, bring you into the 20th century. Well, unfortunately, it didn't really work. The, you know, idea was there in the 90s. Grunge bands and metal bands are really citing Black Sabbath. New metal was starting to take off. You had early versions of it with Faith No More, and then you had collaborations between metal bands and rap bands like Biohazard and Onyx, among many others. The movie The Judgment Night had the soundtrack where it mixed metal bands and rap bands. And all of that stuff was really popular at that time. So bringing in Ice-T to guest on the Black Sabbath album and then bringing in his guitar player to produce, I think the label thought they had a surefire hit there, and it just didn't work. The band was not behind it. I think the band had been behind it and melded with it and accepted that it could have gone a lot better. But you know, when you try to tell Cozy Powell, one of the all-time great drummers, how to drum to change up the way that he's drumming to make it more modern, he wasn't having it, and I don't blame him. He had a style in and of himself. You don't bring Cozy Powell in to play something other than Cozy Powell style drumming. So that in and of itself was the big issue in it. So they've done a remix here. And in doing that, they took out some of the parts that are there. They brought in some other parts that weren't used. They have given it a much more even recording across the take of the thing, so it's less raw and less sort of choppy, in my opinion. I think they were going for that rap rock crossover sound, which I never really cared for. And instead, this has returned the sound of Black Sabbath to the way they were for the late 80s, early 90s. And in my opinion, the new recording of Forbidden can stand very well next to albums like Tear, Cross Purposes, and especially the remastered version of Headless Cross. So these albums had a very particular sound to it, and the oddball out was always this one, but the new remix of it, in my opinion, stands tall right next to these, so that's very good. The other interest here in the box set is that you get 3 unreleased songs. Now, they had talked about having this wealth of songs, and even in the liner notes to this, Iommi talks about having demos to the album Forbidden, and how much they sounded better than this, but we don't get any of those. And again, I think this comes down to legal reasons. Ozzy Osbourne now owns half the name. Tony Iommi owns the rest of it. It was part of the agreement for getting him to return when they started doing reunion shows, I think in late 97, and the recording of the album and so forth. And you know, it is what it is. Iommi gave up 50% of the rights, so now Ozzy can knock down anything that it is that Tony Iommi wants to put together under the name Black Sabbath, which is the reason why in the early 2000s, when the Dio era of Black Sabbath reunited, they couldn't tour under the name Black Sabbath or record a name under, you know, an album under that name, and they had to do it under the moniker of Heaven and Hell. So, you know, there's all these different legal reasons for why we don't get certain things included in the boxes and so forth. But it was basically said that no new material could be included, only previously recorded material. So why certain stuff isn't in there, like demos and live, I don't know. But they had talked about having Tony Martin come in and finish off material and complete it for the box set, but ultimately that was ruled out later on. So if you remember back to all these stories over the number of years that this box set has been gestating, which is probably a solid 5 years at this point, that's why none of the stuff has been included in here. You know, record label rights and politics within the band, who owns the name, being Ozzy, Tony Iommi. But what we do get are these 3 unreleased songs. Cloak and Dagger, which came from the Headless Cross era of 89. What's the Use from Cross Purposes in 94. And Loser Gets It All and From Forbidden in 1995. Those get included on those albums as bonus tracks. So all in all, what are you getting here? You're getting 3 remastered albums, 1 2024 remix, 3 unreleased studio recordings, along with a 60-page book, 1 poster, and 1 tour book. And I always love getting those tour books. So let's take a look at it and really see what it is that you're getting here. All right, so interestingly, you know, they show the 4 albums on the back side. They do list the tracks on them, which I don't think they really needed to include in here. I like the art that's on it. It's very, you know, subtle and to the point, but I just wish they had included something that said the Tony Martin years on this. Typical to all the Black Sabbath boxes, if you bought any of them previous to this from the Ozzy years and stuff, they just lift off like so, and we immediately get inside. I'm glad they keep to that style so that when I put these things together on the wall, they all match up. Right on top, we get the book that comes with it, the 60-page book. We also get this piece here that helps lift everything out. So one at a time, we get the book. Book is beautiful. The information that's inside is taken from old interviews, lots of cool photos with a few things from interviews today. It doesn't really get into anything like what specifically was done to the Forbidden remix. And I really had hoped they had gone track by track and talked about breaking it down and what was done differently within it. And so I read through all of that, the Forbidden era, and it talks about how much they, you know, had hoped that the stuff would work that the label was doing, and then ultimately how it didn't. There is a lot of repeat of information within that because the interviews are taken from back then during the day all the way up to present day. So you get that in there, but you know, it covers each of the 4 albums individually. You get a Headless Cross replica tour book. These have been pretty common for what have been coming in these boxes, and I just absolutely love them. Mostly because of the size. Tour books oftentimes are these enormous things that just don't fit anywhere on bookshelves and stuff. So I like getting them little like this and having them with inside the box sets. Very cool to me. Replica anything, in my opinion, is just awesome. I know there's lots of you guys that could care less. You just want the music. But hey, you know, you're going to pay a little extra for the box set. You might as well get a few goodies with it. You also get a Headless Cross tour poster, promoting, or the album release poster, you know, however it was, but a cool little poster at that. And again, it's a replica of one from back in the day, not just made for now. After we lift that stuff out, we get the 4 CDs. They're, you know, in cardboard that holds them nice and tight in there. You've got a little finger pull that you can use, but I use the ribbon underneath it to help pull them out. And so we start with the headless cross in here. I always like the back cover better because it literally is a headless cross as opposed to that there. There is no sleeve in here, meaning there isn't one that replicates, say, a vinyl version of this with information, lyric sheet, any of that kind of stuff on it. But you do get it in these plastic sleeves, which protects it. And they do the Japanese versions, which are rounded at the ends, which I like a lot. And the back sides of these are done very well with the track listing that I can actually read on it, because oftentimes when these are replicated, it's just far too small. So I think they were sort of replicating the CD versions of these in a lot of ways, which is why the writing is a bit bigger. We then move on to Tear, which is a favorite of mine out of this. I like the back side of this. If I can find my Tear album quick enough, this is what the original back of it looked like. So a little bit different in that. Also noticed in here how much more punchy the artwork is on this. So the other thing of note is that these are very big. They've got spines on these, and this stuff slides in. It's very loose. They almost fall out on it. I kind of wish they had made it a little more tight so that it didn't just, you know, fall out. The next release here, being Cross Purposes, replicates the CD as is, and then Forbidden, which updates the artwork a little bit. People often thought that this artwork here in particular was kind of corny and whatnot. The entirety of the artwork would appear on the back side, which showed all of this here and had the various faces of the different people in the band, you know. So they tried to bring that a little bit into the forefront here, bringing that over so it wasn't just this. And as you wrap this around, you get the remainder of that artwork. So I just wish they had made this a gatefold. I don't think it would have been that much more to have turned this into gatefold art to have gotten all of this side by side to be able to look at. But there you go. And again, there's the sleeve and CD. What I found fascinating is that the CDs, the box set itself, is on Warner Records. Now, I don't know if they acquired IRS Records, which is the label that these were on, the original 4 albums. But it's nice that it's on a major label like that. And if Warner now has the rights to it, could we later be getting a full career spanning box set of some kind from the label? That would be maybe the most cool thing in all, really trying to help bring the whole legacy and career of Black Sabbath to the forefront, not omitting any part of it simply because it did not include Ozzy Osbourne or something. This piece of paper here is on the back side, which tells you the extra stuff that is included in there, the book, tour book, all that sort of stuff. It had this sticker on it, which I was bummed about and glad that this came off the back, and you just end up with this. No UPC, no nothing. So this was here. That comes off of it when you get it, and it's just a nice, clean box. But there you go. That is the Black Sabbath Anno Domini 1989 to 1995 box set, the Tony Martin years, you know, subtitled. It doesn't say it anywhere on it, but that is what we have all been calling it. And so bottom line on this thing, I think it's well put together. As I mentioned, this is very similar to all of the other Black Sabbath boxes that have previously come out. Really, this is mostly for fans of the Tony Martin years. However, I think it's a good way to revisit this period of the band that is so often overlooked and never really gotten its due, that at $50 to $60 total for this box, I paid somewhere in that range for it to get these 4 CDs. And since they've been out of print, even though I've got them, you know, a lot of you guys don't. You are getting these remastered versions. You're getting a remix. You're getting 3 bonus tracks. And then you're getting 60-page book. You get this tour book, and you get a poster that's in it. So you also get some goodies. I think that it makes it totally worthwhile. If we just look at the 4 albums and we say they're $15 a pop on it, that would be 60 bucks right there. So all in all, I think this is a fantastic price for the box set, and a great way to shine a light on that overlooked, underrated era of the band, showing really just how good Tony Martin was. He didn't get the love at the time because he wasn't a named singer. He had already come after Ozzy, Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan, Glenn Hughes. Ray Gillan was an unknown that didn't record, and most people didn't know he was part of the band. So then you bring in, after, Glenn Hughes and Ian Gillan and so forth, you bring in Tony Martin, and people were just saying, I don't care at this point. It just changes too much. But being able to look back like this at it, I think is really helpful. And now with remasters and the remixing, have elevated these albums to a new level that I think they can easily stand next to the rest of the catalog. So I really say, if you're a fan of Black Sabbath, if you're open to trying out these new members, definitely check this out. It is a killer collection of albums, personal favorites of mine that I've always really, really enjoyed. If you want to know why people always talk highly of the Tony Martin era, but yet you never hear it anywhere else, meaning fans talk about it, but you don't really get it in the media and the critics and that sort of stuff, check this out. You're going to find out why, because there's a lot to love in this box set. All right, there you go. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review and unboxing for the brand new Black Sabbath box set that is just subtitled The Tony Martin Years. Certainly let me know your thoughts on it, if you're excited about this and are enjoying it like me, and what you think of the new Forbidden remix, because it is very different than the original one, and I think perfectly captures what should have been the sound when the album came out at the time. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.